Hey Now. It's the Hey Now Howard podcast, the first and only fan podcast dedicated to the king of all media, Howard Stern, and all things related to the Howard Stern Show. I'm Daniel Coyne.
And my name is Tyler Cortad. Today we're going to be talking about Howard Stern's legacy.
Welcome back, and thank you for that Beetlejuice song. Thanks to the Blues Travelers.
Thank you, Beetle.
And all hail Beetle, king of the whack pack. Today we're going to be talking about Howard's legacy. But first I want to say, on your mobile device, whatever you're listening on, hit 5 stars, leave a comment. If you don't like the show, go fuck yourself. You're probably like an Opie and Anthony fan or something whack like that. But now leave us some thumbs up, some 5 stars, good comments. Tell your grandma to listen. Tell all your friends. Sit your cat in front of your laptop and just let them listen to all the IZ6 we get credit for. And that was my message. But what are we going to be talking about today, Tyler?
I don't know. I forget. Now I have this image of a cat just listening to our podcast.
I'll take whatever listens we can get.
Sure. Well, that'll make you, me, and the cat. It's sad. This is a sad topic. Howard's going to retire soon. And soon as in we don't know if that's, a year from now, whenever the contract's up, or a year and a half, whatever that may be, or 5 years up. But either way, the way he wrote this book and the way this press tour is going, it is leading up to... He pretty much this book is what he wants to leave behind as his legacy. Now, that's not to say that he's not going to do anything else with his career past this book, but the way this press tour is going, it's giving you the feeling that this is what he really wants to leave behind. So it makes you start to feel that the bulk of Howard's career, which is obvious, is behind him, and it starts to make you think, when is he going to retire? Did this book push him into an earlier retirement than he maybe thought he would be? Or maybe this book, on the other end, maybe it kind of propels him into a different stage of his career where he feels a little more motivated to do better interviews and things like that. So it could go either way. Either way, it's the career is coming to an end sooner than later. But, what do you think? Do you think the book is going to, make him maybe stay a little bit longer at Sirius?
Yeah, that's a great question. I can kind of see his recent legacy influencing either way. I can see him being proud of putting this book out and wrapping things up. But he has also talked about, well, we can talk later on in the show about how he's going to go about going out, because he said that he doesn't want this drawn out thing. He's just going to end it. And in just one day, they're just not going to be, I don't think it's going to be that dramatic. But I don't think that he wants this prolonged best of and let's have all these guests on. But maybe he will. Maybe by the time
he says all that point. But he's also the one that has these big giant birthday bashes and I mean, not to say that he
press tours.
Right, press tours.
Right.
He's
that's kind of what I think too.
Right. It can't just be a all right, thanks Robin, and then that's the last time we hear of them, and that's it. There's no way that's going to happen. Right? Just a Sopranos ending to a Howard Stern show.
Let's leave it open for us. I will say that I feel better about him signing maybe like a 3-year extension or something at the end of this.
That would make me so happy.
More than I did when he signed this latest one, because this latest one was really drawn out, and he talked about it, and he's asking the staff, what the hell are you guys going to do? And, it was a show topic for a year.
Right.
And the callers are counting. Yeah, Marianne from Brooklyn's counting down the days.
She had 3 heart attacks.
4 strokes. Actually.
4 strokes, 3 heart attacks. Yeah, I mean,
her colon removed.
Yeah, she actually died, and we brought her back, and now we're just happy to have her
here. But I think he may clip on a little extension here. I think that he's got a little bit more energy, and I think maybe with an extension, he even slims the amount of hours down a little bit more. Maybe they have a couple more weeks vacation, or maybe they slim out. I think when they're in the studio, it's fine. He'll do 4 hours. He's used to that.
Right.
But maybe he finds a way to come in studio a couple less weeks. I think that's obviously something that gets renegotiated each time, because even when they first got to Sirius, I want to say they were at least 4 days a week.
Yeah, and they were coming in at 6, and that was more recently, but they started coming in at 7 a.m., not 6 a.m., and I know that had to be a big, change for them.
Adjustment.
Right.
And he said, like, maybe I'll do the show from Florida, but then that's not the show. I got to be in the room with anyone. So I think that's going to hold true.
I don't get
but ultimately, I mean, Howard, well, those East Coasters.
I know, but Florida's
a Jewish guy from New York, so
he loves his Florida.
Second home. But it also brings up the fact, I mean, Howard's got more money than God, so at this point, how did he get to doing it at 65? Yeah, maybe he goes to 68, which is even a weird number to even think about. Like, are they still going to be covering Fist Fest when he's 79? But,
right. You know what I mean? It starts to make you think, like, they're still doing some raunchy shit on
that, or maybe he just has like a Netflix. I'll ask you this: do you ever see him on like Netflix or like an interview? I think that he's tossed that around before, and he said ultimately thought about it, but he walked away saying no. And I'm sure he's gotten offers for stuff like that.
Of course, I think he's gotten
but
crazy
maybe like
offers.
a David Letterman style, where he just has super A-list people, sits down with him for an hour.
Maybe, as long as the format stayed in the sense of a radio setting. I don't think that he's ever going to be that type of guy.
A live audience.
A live audience. Like how Dave just sat in a chair and talked.
Right.
He wouldn't do that. I don't think he likes his physical appearance enough. And I know that's a lot of that shtick, but I really don't think he likes his physical appearance enough to actually take on that role.
And maybe he doesn't want to interview people. Maybe he wants Robin and Fred, and
I think he does.
People are sending him notes.
Right. He really does love the interview portions of it, of the show now, and I think that's what it's evolved to. But he's also still very opinionated, and he still has views on the world. And I feel like, and they talk about this a lot when it comes to retirement.
When he goes on break, that it eats him up.
A thought comes in.
Happen,
right. He doesn't want to give that to Twitter.
Wants to do a bit.
Right. He wants to go on the air and talk about it with Robin, or just talk about it.
Right.
And if he doesn't have that outlet, poor Beth. You know what I mean? Like, then she's gonna, just have to deal with that. So, I think that more so than just the appeal of the interviews. I think that they're probably both equal, but those two things are what's gonna keep him working past what a normal person would probably work past their age. So, I don't know. I agree with you though. I do think that the book, as much as this caused a lot more work for him, I think that this book will also propel him to and motivate him to want to stay at Sirius a little bit longer and do this. I think he's onto something. I think that he knows that he's onto something. I think the success of the book, which it already has proved to be successful, is going to motivate him.
Yeah,
to want to do a little bit more,
because he wants to reach new audiences. He wants to, and that's almost a point of the press tour. He wants to go on shows and reach audiences that he wouldn't on The View or NPR.
Right.
So in that sense, yeah, if you're thinking about it, if he wants to grow his legacy and grow his audience, then he's putting out a lot of effort for going to retire in a year.
Exactly. You're absolutely right. Like, to grow that audience and then just retire, and it's like, okay, great, like, but how much of that audience is actually going to go back to your archive and look at all your stuff? Or don't you want that audience now to see, it's like, oh, cool, you got some new listeners, now let them see what you can do. I think that's going to motivate him a little bit.
Yeah. And of course, it's like anybody, God willing, with health, because especially at his age, it's no gimme. And he talked about having a cancer scare in the book and during his press tour as well. So obviously it goes without saying this is if he's healthy and willing. But I go back to that fact that if he's healthy and willing, he's had so much money for a number of years, so it's not that.
He doesn't need to work.
Right, exactly. he could be doing whatever he wants. He could own an island if he wants. I think he's like a top 10 overall celebrity, like net worth. I think he's around like 100 million plus a year.
Right.
So, yeah, the guy could long ago retired, long ago do whatever he wants. But again, he wants that outlet. And he's still sharp. He's on current events. He's obviously, the show keeps him in touch with current pop stars and comedians and actors. So I think that he's probably feels younger than his age too, and maybe the show gives him that as well.
Yeah.
And ultimately, who doesn't want to be famous and be like, he's ultimately gets a rush from that every time.
Sure, the ego still needs to be fed. Yeah,
exactly.
Right.
And he's not going to be the type that's going to sit there and, I'm going to do a thing on Hulu. I say Netflix or HBO maybe on like I think if he did something, he'd want it to be very well done, very well produced, and he'd really take his time on it. But I think ultimately, the show's his format, because he's been getting those offers his whole career, I'm sure.
Right. Yeah.
I'm sure there's people that, hey, let's do a documentary about you. Let's do your life story. Let's do another private part, whatever, another movie. Cartoons, whatever. I'm sure he's had every offer under the sun. So ultimately, it's still that magic of Robin, Fred, Gary, all the guys put together that drives him.
Right.
Because he could be doing all this stuff already, or he could be doing it for the past 30 years.
Yeah.
But the show has always been, and I think Terry Gross in his NPR interview talked about how, like, she appreciates how he's stuck with radio as his main media, because he could have easily just been like a late night or like done like a Comedy Central show, or
sure,
kept venturing off into, I know he had the E! Show, but that was just basically a video recording of his show, so it wasn't that far different.
But they could have branched off of that, and they could have, he had other offers to do movies after Private Parts. He really could have.
Howard Stern, the high school years.
Right,
cartoon,
yeah, he had other things in development that he could have done, but yeah, he's stuck with radio.
Fart Man, the movie.
Which,
stuff,
we're still.
Let's hope. Yeah,
Dan and I are working on that script right now. We're not giving up on Fart Man the movie.
That's right. We do live in Los Angeles, so we can.
Yeah. Crazier things have happened.
Script, punch it up with Jackie.
But yeah, man. I just wonder what when he actually does in fact retire. I hope that people. Sound like a loser, but I hope that people recognize his career as a whole, though, and realize what he did for media in general, and just we talked about this in another podcast, but just what he did for free speech, and radio as a medium, sure, but media in general, you know what I mean? Just everything that he's done for that. Everywhere. His influence in comedy, which I think is the number one thing. I know people would stress other factors of where he influenced media and people, but his influence on comedy, and whenever you hear other comedians come onto the show and they talk about it, Adam Carolla was just on a few weeks ago, or last week, and just talking about his influence on him and Jimmy Kimmel and people that have been on Saturday Night Live, and how his influence on them, like Jonah Hill is a big one too. Like, I think Jonah Hill is a fantastic actor, and he's a great, Howard Stern super fan. And he's the first one to say, like, phony phone calls is how he got, he was friends with Dustin Hoffman's son, and Dustin Hoffman kind of like got to, see how funny Jonah was from phony phone calls, but Jonah attributes all of that, influence from Howard. You know what I mean? So there's just, it's endless when you look at Howard's influence on comedians, and that's the one thing that I hope people realize.
Yeah, and even look at how boring radio was before he came along, how boring now, and again, Howard's never been shy about claiming that he's been the first of something, but you really could look at his influence across a lot of things where ESPN, CNN, Fox News, everything is opinion based. Everyone has and everyone wants to be like brash and have that opinion, so they stick out of the crowd. And Howard almost like invented that, or was the first person to really like actually speak out and say, "Oh, actually, I think that movie sucked," or "That actress, she was terrible."
Right.
When 99% of all media or any late night is, "Oh my God, this new actress is the greatest thing ever." So, and now you kind of see that more, and now people have.
Well, that's all you see now.
Balls,
it's,
right?
Even on ESPN, everybody, it's all opinion based, right? Everybody's screaming at it's all just about opinion. But you're right. Howard was the first face of that. I'm going to state my opinion and fuck you.
Right.
That's it.
Right. Which is what a lot of people fell in love with, including us.
Right.
And also he did a great job of another influence you see a lot of making the show and his relationship with the staff as much a part of the show as anything. And now you see that on like the Dan Patrick Show or any kind of sports talk show or morning show you listen to. They're all talking about what they did over the weekend, and I'm sure there was a little bit of that, but he really brought that to life.
Really before Howard.
Yeah, there really wasn't.
Yeah.
And even Private Parts and all that digs into that on the more real he became, the more famous he was, because it was such a breath of fresh air into all of the media that, and again, there's like, you can't watch, like, you're never going to watch even like Jimmy Fallon or something late night. He's never going to say some actress sucked on her latest movie because he's scared, because he wants to interview her. And again, Howard kind of became a little bit of that, but ultimately he was really one of the first people that just kind of went against the grain and stuck out. And now that's kind of how you get famous, and now that's nothing, and people do that on YouTube and try to be famous or whatever. But it was kind of a breath of fresh air, and he's still reinventing himself, and
as well as he should, because he was Twitter before Twitter. You know what I mean? Like
right.
He was like the
and he talks about
human
that,
form of being
that
Twitter.
Pisses him off,
right?
Because he's like, me and Robin used to sit there and tell people,
right?
Now everyone's got a microphone.
Yeah, everybody has a microphone
on Twitter, has a point of view, and even my narcissist wants him to be, and this is him talking, I want everyone on my point of view. I don't give a shit about everyone tweeting out, and I don't want anyone paying attention to anyone else's point of view.
Right.
So it was also kind of that too, where they have the reaction to the next morning about the Grammys and clowning on the performances, or someone fucked up the national anthem at the Super Bowl. So it's like kind of your place, like you said, it's kind of that water cooler talk place to go that everyone now has. Now we don't think twice about it, but he's been doing it since the 80s.
Right. Do you think that's still a driving force for him to... Because he talks about that a lot in the press tours, that back in the 90s, he was in 1 out of every 4 cars in the Long Island Expressway. That was a big point of a talking point in all his press tour. Do you think that's still a motivating factor for him that I need to have that many people listening to me? Or do you think it's just getting shit off of his chest or having a good interview? And he's not so consumed with people listening to him as much as he used to. He can be a little more free of that. I'm not sure.
I think, I'll tell you, I think his new book tour surprised me a little bit with that, because when he first revealed, he's like, I have a big secret, and there was a build up, and then he said he was going to write the book. I thought that he was going to say, like, but you know what, like, I'm putting out the book, and like, if my listeners want to get it, it's available, and if it, like, I almost, but then I also realized that Howard is a workaholic, and he realized that if I'm going to put this much work into something, I want to reach audiences that I want to go on NPR, I want to go on this. So I saw him step out. I saw him kind of stretch himself thinner than I thought I would, like that I thought he would when he first talked about doing the book tour. Right. At first he was even saying like, oh, they sent me a list of 300 things, and then I had to slim it down. And I kind of thought he'd do like 2 or like 3,
right?
Maybe like go on a couple different.
So we talk about Bruce Springsteen. He did 3 things or whatever it was.
Right. So, and the reason I say that is because I think that he still cares about reaching new audiences. Yeah. I think, or else he would just say, hey, like, I'm just going to tell my audience, and enough people listen, and I'll sell a few books, whatever. But I think that he still cares about numbers. He wants this to be a smash hit. He wants to point to he's number 1 on Amazon, or I'm sure he wants to sell more copies than his previous books, or
Right.
And when you're a super successful billionaire but still waking up super early every morning and working every day at something, it is that motivating force of. So yeah, I think that's why there was an effort to go on AGT and like to, he even talked about that. My audience got younger. I had little kids running into me in Times Square saying that's the guy from AGT when I used to be considered a monster. So I think he does care, and I think he does want to continue to grow his audience, and I think he wants to have people watch him on CBS Morning News or something. Be like, oh, yeah, I used to listen to Howard back in the 90s or whatever. I haven't heard his show I forgot he was even on air still. And, like, and then all of a sudden they reconnect. So I think I think if he's, because he doesn't do a ton to promote his own show. He says, if I got something to promote, I'll come on.
Right.
Which is kind of what he waited for.
Sure.
I don't know. I was trying to think, what was he even like? What did he used to go on Jimmy? Like, he's been on there, like, I don't know. He did a couple of tours maybe 5 years ago. Was that AGT promo?
AGT promo. And then also if Jimmy Kimmel came to New York, he would just go on go on. I think he was on AGT at the same time, though, so I think that kind of timed out well. But
and then he did, I think he did Letterman because it was Letterman's last year.
Just Letterman's last show. So there would just be, like, special
like
circumstances, but other than that, he wasn't going. Right. He wasn't going on anything other than that. But
so I think he wants to reach an audience, and I guess it goes full circle back to the topic of, I'm hoping that this new energy and wanting to reach people, reach a younger audience, NPR, late night, going on Conan's podcast, and he was even the fact of podcasting.
He fucking ripped on podcasts for so long, and then now. But I kind of get. I thought about this too because I was like, man, he's going on a podcast. He fucking ripped podcasts to shit.
Right.
But
sorry, Tyler, I had a gold dust moment.
I had a gold dust moment. Sorry for the if you're listening on earphones. But I think his thing with podcasts was, if you're going to just start doing a podcast and not be anybody and have like some sort of background in radio, kind of like we are right now, and claim that like, oh, I'm in broadcasting because I'm in.
Yeah, that's the thing. I think
that's what fucking drove him nuts. Like Dan and I wouldn't go out and be like, oh yeah, we're live on the air once a week. Right. No, we're idiots. We know that, and we're doing this on the basis that we're idiots. We're not trying to say that we're going live on the air. But I think that was Howard's point about podcasting. Because
even when people would say, no, there's super popular ones, and they'd say, which ones? And then they'd say, Joe Rogan. Like, well, Joe had an audience already. He's an actor.
If you already had an audience.
Well, Adam Carolla. Oh, he's been a comedian for years. Right. So same thing with Conan. Same thing with
basically saying, if you don't have an audience, don't just start a podcast and think you're going to grow an audience.
Right. Well, we're tapping into a massive audience. So
yeah, right.
We should be super rich from this podcast.
It's more for us and like Marianne. But
even though we said we don't like her, so she probably would hate this podcast. We don't want to get Marianne on our trail.
I love Marianne.
She'll bury us. I hate her.
You hate her?
Oh, she's the worst.
What?
She's the worst.
You really do hate her?
Oh.
I didn't know you hated her.
It says Marianne, you're on the phone on it. Barrel roll out of my car.
Well, her phone calls are terrible, but like I like Marianne. Like when she was on Fallon. Come on, how could you
never want to hear her voice again?
Did it not warm your heart a little bit to see her on Fallon? That was nice.
No, she's a psychopath.
She's fucking nuts.
I follow her on Instagram, and she may literally be a psychopath.
She's gonna be like that. You ever watch that movie Selena, where like
where
assistant kills her? Yeah, like their number one fan.
I haven't seen the movie, but I know the story.
Basically, that's
wasn't
what
it the head of her fan club or something? So yeah, basically,
murders her.
The mother of the Whack Pack.
What if that's how Howard? That's his legacy. What if that's how he dies?
Boba doing that since he showed up.
Oh, hey now, Howard, and just stabs him right in the heart. Boba's not so stupid. And then Eric's around the corner. He's like, "Oh my god, no!
Oh my god, no!"
Oh, what a fucking way to go. But hopefully that's Howard's legacy, and I hope that's not how it ends.
Oh, yes.
But, no.
It's podcasting.
Yeah, and then, yeah.
Oh, but yeah, the reason I brought that up is podcasting is a younger audience, and I know Howard being crazy about this. He's looking into these things. He's not going on these blindly.
Sure.
So he's looking to tap into younger audiences. Something I kind of floated out to you off air that I thought about is maybe that Joe Rogan was a comedian that he mentioned that he pissed off, that accepted his apology but said I'd rather not be like
accepted but didn't accept. Right. Yeah, it was like,
I'm thinking maybe that was it, because he probably has the biggest audience. I mean, he's got a bigger audience than Howard Show right now, I would say.
Yeah,
by far.
I would imagine he does.
Sirius doesn't release their things, but
yeah, but his podcast is measurable. Yeah,
because they used to be friends, and he even used to say, I used to have Joe on the show, and they talked about it a little bit, and Matt brought it up of, I think you should go on Joe Rogan, and so maybe it was that. So maybe there was a little bit of like he didn't go on Adam Carolla's, he didn't go on Mark Maron, so I'm sure. But then again, those are California ones,
right? And Conan came to him.
He did. Okay. Oh yeah, he shot it in the studio.
Conan came to him. So
in the studio. That's right.
Howard, I think Howard is very strategic in the way he does that. Like, he knew that if he went to California, he would have had to open the door to so many other people.
Yeah.
So he's like, you know what? I'm staying here in New York. If anybody wants to come to me, I'll do it.
That's true. That could have been his natural way of slimming down a lot of it.
I think that's smart. I probably would have done the same thing if, instead of opening up all those doors. To the Joe Rogan point, maybe you gave that to me, and I was like, yeah, that could be it. My first gut instinct was Will Ferrell, just because Will Ferrell was always mentioned in the conversations about Robin Williams, about interviews that he wished he could do over. Robin Williams, Will Ferrell, and I think Eminem was one too, but I don't think he cares too much about Eminem as far as an interview.
I do remember hearing that Eminem one.
I don't remember the Eminem one, but
Eminem was going to say, yo, what's up, dog?
God,
it was like when Eminem first came out.
It had to be terrible. I don't know.
It was awful.
This
is like 90s Howard. This is like
shit.
I mean, Eminem came out in like the late 90s.
I'm sure, like, when he says that he cringes during some interviews.
This is like K-Rock.
Yeah, I'm sure that's a cringeworthy one. But he did say that it was a comedian, so... And Will Ferrell, I mean, could obviously be classified as a comedian. He's a very well-known comedic actor. So I thought that maybe that was it, because Will Ferrell was always mentioned in interviews that he wished he could do over. He didn't think that he did a good job, and he thought that he, obviously what he did with Robin Williams is legendary. So I think he did the same thing. So I always thought it was Robin Williams Will Ferrell that he wanted to do over. And he regretted, and he reached out to try to apologize, and Will Ferrell was just like, yeah. Nah, I'm good. I don't need it.
I mean, Will Ferrell's as A-list as you're going to get, so it's not like he needs to be back on the show.
But Will Ferrell, here's why I think you might be more correct than I am, because Will Ferrell doesn't have necessarily an outlet. I mean, maybe he has I think he does have some sort of thing, but it's not necessarily as well known as Joe Rogan. Where I think what was it? Did Howard say that person said, "I don't need it," or I don't need your
when. Yeah, I think he alluded to
it was something like that. I was like, I don't
mention that Mamet brought up Joe Rogan. He said, Mamet said, yeah, his shows are like 4 hours, and Howard's like, 4 hours, Jesus Christ, I don't want to do that. Obviously, kidding, but then he mentioned, he's like, oh, I love Joe. He used to come on the show all the time back when he used to host Fear Factor and back in those days. And he said, last time Joe was on, I said something towards the end of the interview, or maybe it was even off air after the interview ended, and it just went off the wrong way. And he was like, and he doesn't think him and Joe have been on the same, friendship level ever since.
Right.
And being that he is, probably has the largest platform, maybe of anybody out there right now.
Sure.
Because each show gets, 100 million plus across all different platforms. So that kind of makes me think, but
no, I think you're probably right, because if it was I can't see him holding a grudge, but Joe Rogan really doesn't need it. He doesn't need Howard, to really, accept the apology and maybe go on the show and have some sort of. Joe Rogan does not need that publicity at all. He's perfectly fine. So,
and I have heard that. I also listen to Joe Rogan's podcast a lot. I'm a fan, and I have heard that he's kind of that style of how he manages himself, where he doesn't do a ton of extra stuff. He just knows that he has his audience, and doesn't have to do a bunch of extra appearances.
Right. Yeah, I mean, I think that would... I don't know. I think this new Howard would be bothered by the fact that someone wouldn't respond to an apology. But maybe I'm just speculating. I think that... I don't know, maybe he's evolved enough to know that, like, you know what, I apologize, and I'm just going to move on. I'm not going to think about it anymore. But I think that might irk him a little bit. What do you think? If Joe Rogan,
yeah.
say that that Joe Rogan is that person, or if it's Will Ferrell, if that person didn't accept his apology, think that bothers him at all, or think he just, you know what, all right, fine, I'll move on from it, like he says he did?
I think it bothers him, but I also think he knows that, what are you going to do?
Right.
I think he knows he's obviously past the point of his career where he's picking major beefs with people. So
exactly.
Yeah, maybe if this was whatever in the 90s, then he goes on this, and Joe Rogan had another huge show with a huge audience, then yeah, it probably would have been an all-out war.
And I think this ties into, you know, how he's not going to be on the air for much longer. So why start a beef that he's not going to, you know, be able to finish, you know, really have it might not have an end to. So why start one now? You know, yeah. He's definitely like...
And I don't think he's interested in a genuine beef. I think it was just kind of one of those, maybe they had a okay conversation and then just kind of left it at that, of like
you
apology
know what?
Accepted, but let's just
we're
go
good.
our own
We don't need
ways
to be friends about it.
Right.
But, you know, so we both agree that at least this book is probably going to motivate him to want to do a few more years on Sirius and, you know, collect that fan base that he's going to get from the book and show that new fan base about what he can do with interviews and what his show has evolved into. But, playing devil's advocate, what if this doesn't do that? And what if this book is, for lack of a better term, a bookmark or a bookend on his career? And he's like, you know what? I've done everything that I wanted to do. And this book kind of proves that I don't need to do anything else. I've interviewed everybody that I really want to interview. Yeah, maybe I can get one or two more. And maybe there's a couple other funny bits that I could do. And maybe there's going to be some news events that I could maybe, you know, I'd want to tell my audience about. But enough's enough. You know, I'm going to be, whatever, at the time he's going to be 66, 67. And he retires. Shit. That could happen.
It's going to be a tragic day, my friend.
Mm-hmm.
And there's a lot of people that rely on this show, and I know we do. And, yeah, there's certain times that, like, even if you're going through something in your personal life or something, and you can just kind of throw the show on and get lost in it for a while. So, yeah, I know people have called in that have been in dire situations or sick or whatever, and the show's kind of pulled them out of that and been an outlet for them.
I know it's such a cliche and a corny thing to talk about, but it's so true, man. That's happened to all of us. Yeah, it sucks.
Yeah, it makes your work day go quicker, makes your commute go
better.
Dude,
Dan and I live in Los Angeles, and driving here might be hell on earth. It's the fucking worst thing in the entire world. And I swear, I've only lived here for 7 years, but if it wasn't for Howard and having him to listen to whenever I'm driving around and sitting in traffic, I'd fucking jump out of my car window out of the fucking onto, you know, oncoming traffic. I'd lose my mind. So
yeah, and he's talked about how that's kind of the design of the show. Someone driving in their car, being able to laugh at, not worrying about others judging at what they're laughing at, just kind of that raw comedy. So there's definitely going to be that element. And now we have podcasting, and we have very good podcasts, but nothing has really quite captured that magic of Robin, Fred, obviously Howard,
right,
and Gary, everyone they bring.
It's like your favorite show, you know. Like, I mean, if you have a show that's like compared to Game of Thrones, I guess. You know, you have your cast of characters that you know and love. Bad example.
This is a 40-year version,
right? It's a 40-year version of that.
So there's been people that have legit been listening for 40 years that have been made.
You can
every day.
The only comparison you can really make it to is The Simpsons, just because of how the longevity.
But even that is not it's not that people have their daily schedule around The Simpsons.
Exactly.
You know, they don't have it on during work or driving to work.
Right.
And even Sternthology kind of gets you through the...
Sure.
And there's probably... You know, Sirius is probably... I'm sure he already has something worked out where there's probably going to be some channel that just loops his stuff 24/7.
Him and Conan talked about that as just well, as like owning your own stuff and being able to play that, right?
Exactly. But it's not the same. Obviously, like knowing that there's a new Stern show after the Grammys, or clowning on whatever.
I couldn't wait until his show after the Game of Thrones finale.
Exactly.
I couldn't wait to hear it, even though I didn't agree with him whatsoever.
Right.
I couldn't wait to hear about it because I just any big event that it's in pop culture or any thing in the news, I'm excited to hear about it on the show.
And ultimately, it's like you listen to the show and you never quite know what exactly. Maybe it's a Fred drop. I was talking to Tyler, and like I noticed myself laughing multiple times in the first 5 minutes of the intro of the show just on Fred drops alone.
Before Rob Zombie even stops singing, you're already laughing.
And it's just the whole chemistry, and it's Fred and the sound effects and the way everything just kind of comes together, and the really good satire on things. I mean, we're gonna have another political election coming up.
Right.
So he's going to be on fire about that. He's going to want to talk about the candidates.
I honestly hope he gets a little more politically involved. Not because, I think it's his duty or anything like that. I know some celebrities like Sarah Silverman come on and they say, well, you should because you have such a strong voice and people listen to you and people follow you. Howard's very, when it comes to politics, he's just very level-headed and common sense based. And I think a lot of people that are party affiliated
use those voices.
What's that?
We could use those voices right now.
We could use some, just a common sense, just a balanced way of looking at things. Like, look,
or even having two. I mean, he could even set his show up and have two major candidates. I mean, not like a debate, but he could even have two on at different times or at the same time. I mean, he could really bring it out, and he wouldn't bring the dick jokes or whatever. He would take it very serious.
I think he...
if he had two major candidates on,
right.
Maybe not Trump, but maybe, let's say, two major Democrats running that want to kind of, reach an audience and really differentiate themselves, much like he talked about how he wished Hillary would have come on. So I say that because this is going to come up around the time of his...
retirement,
resigning,
right, or resigning, sorry,
or contract being up. So maybe that goes back to the new energy in the show of there's going to be a lot to talk about,
right? I wonder if he feels an obligation to stay on to his fans, number one, but for something like we just said, I don't think that he consciously views himself as something that.
Do you think he cares about the fans that much?
I think there's a part of his ego that wants to feed that a little bit. Yeah, I don't think that it's like a self.
He wants to be famous.
I think it's
that he cares about the he obviously cares about the content.
He cares about the content.
Do you think he cares? Well, I shouldn't say obviously he cares about the fans. He take calls and he's
right. I do a little bit, but I do know what you're saying, and I don't think that I don't think he's going to solely stay on the.
It was going to be enough already.
Right, he's not going to stay in the air just like, well, they want me to stay, so I'm going to stay.
Right.
I don't think it's
kind of what I mean.
Yeah, I don't think it's anything like that. I do think that there is. I think he's going to feel, among other things, but I think there's going to be a little bit of an obligation because. I don't know. I maybe I'm thinking too much into this, but I do think. Well, clearly we're doing a podcast about the fucking guy, but I do think there might be a little bit of an obligation because I think that he realized, even just through the book, that he has more of a voice as far as politics go. Just in the sense the Hillary interview that he had in his book, and obviously the multiple Trump interviews. I think that he might feel that. He could have an impact.
He wants to stay relevant.
And
that's what I think, too.
Yeah.
Is that he's still, so we're both in our early 30s. So I guess through the E! Show, too, our generation kind of, the reason I say that is because I don't think the kids in their young 20s or younger really even know Howard Stern, or I mean, they may know.
No,
his
they
name
don't. I mean,
whatever,
you hear him. His average,
the guy with the hair that had a radio show.
Sure, his average listener is 37,
right?
And it was 37 in the 90s. There is some. I think there. He that's a badge of honor for him. I think that he says that with pride. in the sense that he has stayed relevant.
Right.
Exactly.
And I think that's another reason that I'm hoping. I'm thinking a 3-year extension. That's what I'm thinking. That'll be just right. But I also was kind of, since the last renegotiations went until the last hour, I was kind of expecting this time to be like not even talked about, but he's already kind of talking about, I don't know, Robin, what do you think? What are we going to do here? So, fingers crossed.
Sure. Yeah, we're hoping for the best, but I mean, obviously, we got to prepare like that.
What do you think's going to happen with like staff members?
Holy shit!
Do you have any?
Somewhere Sal just jumped off the Long Island Bridge. just
the Long Island Express.
That's way, yeah.
Well,
I don't know, man. There's some of the
talented,
super talented. I think some of the younger staff will be okay. I know he jokes on JD a lot, but JD has become such a figure in the show that people know him. People in Hollywood know him. I think that I could see him moving out to Los Angeles. I could see him having some sort of career. I don't know if he's gonna be a director. I do. You know what's funny? I've never felt like more in touch with JD. Whenever like he's like, JD said he wants to be a director, and then he just started like, "What did you direct? What have you directed? Like, why don't you go direct something? Go on the weekends. You don't work on the week. You gotta go do it." And like but they also talk about how hard JD works for the show. Like he's completely working for the show. But I don't know. I felt that somehow. Like I just like the fact that like JD wants, like he knows he can do something, wants to do something, hasn't done much to do it yet.
Right.
But and then just getting shit on, so he just like, fuck this. Like I don't want to say anything anymore. Like I don't want to do it. But the truth is, I mean, the dude directed. I mean, he helped direct an episode of Always Sunny. He did like a little Ronnie documentary or whatever. But dude, I know fucking half the people in Hollywood that have directed less than that and are still getting more opportunities. So that's not to say that I don't think JD could be okay. That's him. And I obviously he's a really good worker, and I think that most people on the staff will get a very good recommendation from Howard if he does retire.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, they could always jump, but then again, it's kind of a dying media too. It's not like you can just jump on another monster radio show. So
how do you go to a different radio show after Howard Stern show? I mean, you got to go somewhere else. You got to go to a different medium. I feel like. And with the app, I feel like whenever Howard actually retires and the app is kind of in its full force, a lot of these players, like Sal, Richard, Mamet, Steve Nowicki, Chris Wilding, a lot of these guys will have enough FaceTime and enough of a resume, a video resume that you can put together. I mean, they can be okay.
For sure, they're working for the biggest radio show of all time.
I think they'll be okay.
That's not a bad resume,
but then you think there's the.
But then there's what's the step down too. It's like they're gonna find a job.
Sure,
but I guess you
have
to be at peace with.
You don't want to be stuttering John doing a fucking podcast.
Exactly.
Like you know what I mean.
But what are you gonna do? I guess you gotta appreciate what you had, and it's better than not being a part of it in the first place.
Like it would break my heart to like fucking see it's the Richard and Sal podcast, and that's all they're doing.
Well, Sal has like a whole like cooking channel on YouTube.
Oh my god! Sal the Turtle, the racehorse, is going to make him a lot of money too. I've heard it mentioned
by and I think it's a conscious effort that Howard is not himself. He's not mentioning it, but I think I've heard other staffers mention it when they have like a round table. But Sal having a YouTube channel, but it's almost like when you watch the Whack Pack, if you follow them on Instagram or something, and you watch them, and it's really true what they say about like the clips that they play on the show. That's like them combing for gold already. That's them going through the stuff.
Some of it's really
you don't want to sit there
bad.
And watch. No, you do not want to sit there and watch the live feed of Jeff the Drunk's trailer.
You ever watch Benji shit? It's bad. Like
you will kill yourself within the first 15 minutes.
Here's what I don't get to like. How could it all be that bad? They all work for the number one show. They know what it takes to to be a success and like.
Well, there's a difference between
a professional environment.
I think Benji's a good writer, but is he a front and center showman? Is he like good enough to just record himself and be funny?
Right.
So that's what I think happens. Like you'll see, like I'll listen to Bobo on the phone for 45 minutes, and with Fred, Robin, and Howard, I'm dying laughing. but I'll watch him for 2 minutes on Instagram and I want to die.
Right, yeah. Same with Jeff the Drunk. You want to fucking kill yourself, right?
So there's a lot of these characters, and I think the staff, they're going to find jobs. They're going to be okay. They need to make a paycheck. Gary may I think Gary, Robin, and Fred may just retire with them.
I don't see Gary retiring.
Probably not Gary, but I could definitely see Fred and Robin.
I don't know.
Maybe Robin doing maybe guest appearances on The View.
I could see that, but I could see Robin retiring. I can't see Fred retiring. I feel like Fred's one of those guys that just it's going to want to work.
Pretty good money.
I know. I'm not saying not saying he needs to work.
They're all multimillionaires. Not that they need to work.
I want to do a whole podcast on Fred. I fucking love Fred so much.
We will.
I love Fred, but I'm
afraid.
I think that Fred will continue to work. He'll continue to work in some capacity. I mean, I don't know. He's a weirdo, man.
He's a musician. They used to play ads at the end. They'd be like, "It's Fred Norris and blah blah blah." The New York. It wasn't anything big. It would just be some New York club, but just for the love of it. He's not out to make. Obviously,
right.
Again, he's.
I'm
pretty sure all those guys. Howard makes a ridiculous amount, and then Robin makes. Again, all these celebrity things are
you never know what they believe
about inflated salaries.
Well, talking about salaries, I hate to fucking bring this guy up again, but Stuttering John has his fucking podcast, and he talks about how I don't listen to it. All right, don't quote me on this. Honestly, you can attest to this. We found out about it today, and then listened to it for about 10 minutes. But in that 10 minutes, I actually read something too, because he wrote a book, but about how little the staff is paid on the Howard Stern show, and how Howard makes this crazy amount of money, and he doesn't pay this, and the rest of the staff makes nothing, and then he kind of shuns the staff for going on trying to make their own money by doing other things, because they slap the Howard Stern show name on it, and so he doesn't want that associated with it. So that's the negative rap on it. But
I mean, I can see that.
I could see that.
Not everyone can make a ton of money,
right? How
many people?
But I mean, okay. But if you're Richard Christie and you're making, let's say, $100,000 a year,
okay,
is that fair?
I'd say, yeah. In New York City,
that's like 60 anywhere else. I mean, that's
right. But that's exactly.
So I mean, but you're on the number one show and have millions of subscribers, and you're one of the top people. And do you make more?
But
I mean, is there more money to go
really
around?
That's the thing. Is Howard's making 100 mil plus. Robin, I think, is making 10, and I heard Gary's 5 or 6. Fred are in both. Yeah, I think I want to say Fred's maybe 7, and Gary's 5. And then, but it's like anything. It's you look at an NFL team, the quarterback's going to be making $30 million a year,
right?
But the backup, the backup guard is going to be making $500K.
Even more of an equal comparison is just how we talked about in the last podcast: late night talk show hosts.
Right. Yeah.
Writers make. You look at Stephen Colbert or Jimmy Fallon. They're the face of everything.
Entry level college kids.
Not to say that they don't work hard; they work their asses off too. But they have writers and interns and production people that are working their fucking ass off. And they're probably making, of course, a fraction. So I guess it's unfair to analyze the whole pay scale whenever you look at the grand scheme of entertainment business.
Well, that's what I was going to say. This is a little bit different because it is the Howard Stern show. So he's going to make... And plus I'm sure he has top agency,
Don Buchwald.
Yeah, I was going to say Don Buchwald and all those guys.
Shout out to Don Buchwald. If you're listening, I'm available.
That's right. Tyler's available. So Tyler's an actor, by the way, so he's got the ins and outs of this town all figured out.
Yeah, so I got it all figured out.
When we talk about these things,
that's why we know something here.
But Howard's got the best agent. He's got the best lawyers negotiating for him. He's going to get the absolute maximum. He's probably, Sirius is probably damn, are we really making as much money as we're paying him for it? But
right.
But you and I wouldn't have Sirius subscriptions without them, or at least
no.
So
I almost didn't read whenever. Not to talk shit on Sirius here, but I get this call once every 6 months where it's hey, I look at my credit card bill, and all of a sudden I get charged $100 for my Sirius subscription, where before I was getting charged $5 a month. I'm like, what is this? So I call them. They're like, oh yeah, this is your actual normal thing. Call them, and I talked to them for maybe 10 seconds. I was like, okay, well, I'm going to cancel. Like, okay, well, how about we just do $6.99 a month? I'm like, okay. Well, you went from 100 or whatever the numbers are, but it's so inflated, it's ridiculous. Right. Or it's like they want to charge me X amount of dollars, more, and all you do is talk to them. But I always the reason I bring that up is just because I'm very I don't know how the pay scale works as far as Sirius is concerned and how that reflects.
Well, Sirius is worth like no money,
right?
Like I'm about to look at their stock right now.
So how do they afford to pay everybody? Because they have a lot of talent at their thing. A lot
of stock out, so it's worth $5.37, which is actually I want to say it used to be less than $1. Oh no.
I don't know, but
it got as low as it got in 2010. It was worth 34 cents a share, and now it's worth $5.37. So, I mean, they're increasing their revenue. I know that a big thing for them is getting into more cars, so they'll sign big deals with major automobile manufacturers to.
That's how I got hooked, to be honest with you. I wouldn't have listened to Howard if it wasn't. I bought a new car, and that was in there, and I actually was moving out to California. I bought a car in Pittsburgh, moved out to California a month later. In that 4-day trip, I found Howard. I found God. I found my Jesus. I found Jesus.
Drove into the light.
Drove right into the light. Honestly, the
reason we're talking about this is because Howard makes so much money that we're trying to figure out, is it worth what they're paying him?
Yeah, I'm trying to figure where the rest of the money goes, because if he's making all that money, and they do have other
I think that's where all the money goes.
And there's a lot of other talent at Sirius. Think about it,
I'm talking about just on Howard's show.
Oh, I'm talking about...
Because you figure even...
Think about all the Sirius
stuff.
Just
think about his show, because then you staff, now they have video. So, right. I think they said they are around almost 80 employees or something like that, just on his show alone, now that they have video and all that. So...
Well, it's like Howard and then the rest of the channels.
Six-figure...
Right.
Probably Richard Sal. But then again, they also work 3 days a week for
all those other guys work 5.
That's true.
JD's working 5.
They do the wrap up show every day.
Gary even works 5. John Hines working 5.
Yeah.
So these guys, I don't know what these guys are making, but it's not a lot.
Well, I don't know. John Hines maybe making $250,000.
I guess guys that are on air make more, but I don't know who. Howard seems to always whenever these things come up on air, he seems to be like, well, that's not mine. That's Jim Meyer. That's whoever he hands that off. That's not my jurisdiction.
True,
God, dude, Howard has a fucking say in that.
I mean, I'm sure he can give promotions, but I don't think he's sitting there saying writing out people's salaries.
No, I think you're right.
If someone came to him, hey, I'm really.
But if okay, let's say you find out that I don't know, Steve Nowicki's making more than Richard, I feel like Howard would be like, well, that's not right, or you know what I mean, or vice versa. I'm just using that as an example, but I think Howard, he doesn't have maybe a say in the amount, but maybe who gets graded. You know what I mean? Who gets
that's
paid?
What I mean.
Yeah.
If someone came to him and said, I think I earned a promotion, he obviously has power in saying. But I don't think he's sitting there with an Excel sheet and being I think that they make 125 and they make 115.
That's got to be rough though, man.
They do. They're serious employees.
I would love to know.
It does create. You're right though. It almost does create that double-edged sword, because they did have the Ronnie Block party, and those guys would go on the road and they would talk about that. They're we make way, and Artie would talk about that. I make $1 million doing stand-up a year.
Right.
Artie was making good money because, again, he was an on-air personality. So he used to say he was making $1 million plus a year, but that was.
Now we all know what these net worth, celebrity net worth things. They're terrible.
I don't know how we got off on this tangent.
I know, but now you got me
What's
looking.
Howard making?
Well, no, I didn't look at Howard. I just looked up Chris Wilding just for like the sake of looking up a staffer. First of all, not easy to find. And I wish I didn't bring it up because now I've clicked on the link and it's actually not there.
Fascinating podcast.
Fascinating information coming out of Tyler Cortez. But, fuck it.
Well, so we're talking about these staffers if he doesn't. So if he does retire, also, what do we think we want to see out of the show? I'm interested to see if he does something of bringing on people like he's already. I don't think he's going to bring on Artie just of a mental. I don't think he wants to go there. He doesn't want to have Artie. He doesn't want to be responsible for any negative things that would result of that. And I think that he genuinely just wants the best for Artie. But like,
do you
why not have Jackie on and just bullshit about the past and be like, you know what, we had some crazy times. You know, like, if he wants to talk about a great interview, I think that'd be a great interview.
I think it'd be a great interview, too, and I think it would show... I mean, Howard talks a lot about how he's evolved in psychotherapy and just being a more, a human being almost. And if he's that grounded and if he's that centered in as far as and confident in himself, why would that be an issue? Right. You know what I mean? Like, do you understand what I mean? Like,
yeah.
If
and not just sit there and clown on them. Hey, aren't you? Because for a while that was a big topic, and they would just clown on Jackie. Hey, can you believe that he left? And he's an idiot.
Jackie and Artie aren't relevant. I mean, Artie is.
No, not at all.
Jackie's not. I haven't heard Jackie's name.
I'm not talking as far as a relevancy. I'm talking as far as like.
As like a wrap up if he's going to retire, and it's like let's just have somebody in. Yeah,
I just agree. Like, hey, let's talk about the old days. Like, let's talk like. Let's whatever. They could riff about whatever when they first started about, funny stories, favorite interviews that they did.
Right.
Yeah, I mean they would blow through an hour in no time, and it wouldn't. Again, I do remember he did have Jackie on the show, at least once, maybe multiple times since he left, and I do remember him walking away saying like that was kind of weird, and it was mostly kind of like. Almost like a joke of like, oh, Jackie, like, what are you really up to? Your wife has like a 1-800 number booking you gigs.
Yeah.
It's kind of like a sideshow. But I think, again, with like Howard saying how evolved he is, in which he has been, and his interviews becoming better, I think that'd be really cool to just sit down and just like talk about, and maybe even talk about leaving the show, but make it more of like a personal thing or like. Talk about the actual real experience instead of making a joke about it.
I think Howard might be a little scared of what he might hear from those guys, though. Do you think that might be true?
I also think when you're...
If he wants to open up to honesty, and he has Artie or Jackie in there, do you think that he doesn't want to have them in because, well, maybe their honesty might paint Howard in a light that he doesn't want to be seen on the air? And I'm not saying that. Like,
that's
that could...
a good point.
You know what I mean? Because there might be a little bit of bad blood, and they might say like everything's cool and all, but if Howard starts to go dig deeper into their psyche, into like what they were thinking, and they might push back a little bit, like, well, Howard, you did this, and this is, and maybe Howard doesn't want that.
Yeah, no, that's a good point. Yeah, ultimately he wants to put himself in the best light, and yeah, I'm sure those guys have a story to tell, and I'm sure there's behind the scenes stuff that we don't know about, or.
Sure.
And I know Artie talked about him putting out books and his publicist begging him to just call Howard and ask, and he was too ashamed to, and then finally he did, and then Gary basically said, yeah, I don't think it's going to happen, and kind of had like a smug reaction, and that like kind of really pissed him off.
Yeah.
So there is like an element to Howard that And I think, too, he has so many people pulling at him that I think once he gets people disconnected, like a Stuttering John, a Jackie, an Artie, that he says, you know what, they decided to go on. Yeah, Stuttering John decided to go to Leno. Jackie decided not to, was a pain in the ass during renegotiations or whatever. Artie went through all his struggles. So I think also Howard has an angle of like I don't need to fuck them. Like they're already
Howard's
gone.
a super loyal guy, and if you're not if you kind of show that you might not be as loyal as Howard, he kind of writes you off. Would that be fair? You think?
Yeah.
Yeah.
And I guess maybe for him, he'd say there could be more negative consequences than the good of it. But being huge fans of the show, I think that would be a cool thing. Or maybe even if he doesn't want to do those two, maybe just even doing other, bringing like kind of blast from the past or whatever.
Yeah, I would love it.
Lisa G or like.
I personally would love it. I think that would be great. I just don't know how much Howard is a sucker for nostalgia and things like that. You know, like
yeah.
I don't know if that's
I
in
mean,
his...
they put together those shows all the time, though. And again, you brought up a point earlier I think was good as today. I don't think he's going to be like he said, we're just going to end it one day and Rob and I are just going to sign off. You'll never hear from us again. But I think when it comes down to it,
sure.
Again, that you guys are going to pick up of, all right, I need to let people know that this is like my final...
Right.
Whatever, last 3 months.
And
then I think he's going to do similar to like Letterman of let me get Billy Idol back, or Billy Joel back in here.
Right.
Let me get whatever Paul McCartney or whatever interview that he's been chasing. That
I think it's going to take a lot of right. I think it's going to take a lot of people around him saying like, look, this is what we need to do. You want to leave, fine, but let us get together a lot of people for you to let. Because you've in your last, I'm sure in his last few years, he's going to let a lot of people know what they meant to him, as far as his interviews and things like that. Let us reverse that. Let us get some people in here like Paul McCartney and let them share what you mean to them.
Right.
I hope and he's weird like that, like Letterman is, but I hope he lets that happen because I think that would be very interesting and fascinating to hear. A lot of celebrities like talk about how. What he means to them and how he influenced them and things like that. So
yeah,
I hope.
I guess my point too is to be more reflective on the show too.
Oh, I don't want it to happen yet. I'm not ready. I'm not ready for him to leave. I'm not ready for him to retire. Ooh,
yeah. I think he's being reflective on things like his favorite interviews, but I'd like him as we wind things down to really talk about like the origins of the show and them coming all together and I'm sure they'll talk about that, but maybe just kind of have a little bit of that nostalgia. Even though it's going to suck, it's going to be sad, it'd be kind of cool. And again, I kind of harp back on maybe having a Jackie or even just different people throughout maybe even people that he's still in good touch with, but just kind of
somebody like Jimmy Kimmel or he's been on a bunch of times,
or like
but just
Lisa
people that
G, even the old staffers,
Lieberman,
those guys,
right? Who was the one Sour Shoes tortured?
Lieberman.
No. Sour?
Yeah.
Sour.
That was
Sour? You're going to go to jail for this.
Steve Langford.
Steve Langford
has a huge penis.
Sour? You're going to go to jail for this. I want you to go to jail. It's the best. Fuck. Howard's legacy.
You to go to jail for this.
Howard's legacy, man.
But yeah, I'd like to see. I mean, maybe not. Maybe not. That may not be the best interview with or maybe just even have a couple of them in and just be like, "Hey, we had some good times, and remember that Bigfoot interview," and just kind of, I guess, wind things down and be reflective on his legacy.
Sure,
and I think he will when the time comes to it.
Yeah, I'm sure there'll be a big send off. There's got to be. I can't imagine a Sopranos ending to this thing. There's going to be a send off. There's going to be a big whack pack, thing.
What's the whack pack going to do?
Oh my God, no!
We're trapped like Watson here.
Oh God. Who knows? We'll do a whole new...
You want to talk about sad?
Oh, the sad life of the whack pack.
Without...
We'll probably be fucking have a podcast with them. What are you talking about? We're going to be right with them. Talking about sad life, we're right there. All right. Well, that being said, we'll wrap up this podcast on Howard's legacy with a very depressing ending because we just realized what our lives are.
Click 5 stars. Hit thumbs up. Comment. Say you loved it.
Yeah.
Tell your cat. Put your turtle in front of your radio.
Thanks, Daniel Coyne, for all
Hamsters love our podcast.
The promos. Dan's good at that stuff. Again, this is the Hey Now Howard podcast. My name is Tyler Quartet.
I'm Daniel Coyne.
Bye for now.
Out.
He's as bad as can.